at it. That means that I have to start getting my race simulation bikes, the key workouts that prepare me for a half Ironman on point. So today, while I do that bike, we are going to revive
Thoughts from the bike.
And I'm going to tell you about how to structure your race simulation bike in the 3 months leading up to your race. This is early to get going on a 3.5-hour workout during the week. All right, so what we're talking about here are the long endurance bikes that are typically associated with really getting ready in the last 2 to 3 months before a key race. These are often done on the weekend, and in the last 2 to 3 months before a race, I recommend that you get in at least 4 of these sessions, ideally 5 or 6. Oh, also, you might want to get a pencil and a piece of paper because I'm going to be giving you a lot of structure about these workouts. So of course, the first question is, how long should these race simulation bike days be? Well, from a sprint through to an Olympic, half Ironman, we're talking about 35 kilometers, somewhere around 20 miles, 60 kilometers, somewhere around 38 miles, 120 kilometers, roughly 74 miles, and then for an Ironman, about 5 to 5.5 hours. At the Ironman level, it's not quite necessary that we go so super long. It's more about time and making sure that we can get through that 5 to 5.5 hour energy hissy fit that our body goes through. Get through that, should be okay. Now, should you be doing this on the aero bike or a road bike? Well, as Cameron Worth, who is teaching a how to bike with Cameron Worth, the guy is the 2-time defending Kona course record holder, he's teaching that course. If you go to triathlonterran.com/early masterclass, you can get in on the pre-sale for half price, $45 instead of $90. Anyway, he does only about 1 ride a week in the aero bars on his time trial bike. He just wants to keep his body aware of how to get into that position. 75–80% of his riding is done on a road bike. But this key session is that session that is done in the aero position. We're trying to mimic what we go through on race day as close as possible, so that means that this long endurance ride is done as much in the aero bars as possible. How should this workout look? Well, the majority of it should be in low intensity zone 2 heart rate, under your race pace. We're looking at building our cardiovascular system, and the best way to do that is at zone 2. If you haven't gone and done it yet, go to triathlonterran.com/HR training and get our free heart rate system for how to train with your heart rate. This is the best way to build endurance. So while you're in that low intensity zone, what I want you to do is focus on nasal breathing. You can use something super good looking like this intake breathing nose bar, a breathe right nasal strip, or just puff your top lip out, like helps you breathe. Why we do that is that it opens up your blood vessels and it actually keeps more carbon dioxide in your blood, which allows our muscles to strip more oxygen out of the red blood cells. So we actually become more efficient at processing oxygen. Also, while we're at that low intensity zone, keep your cadence quite low in the 50 to 70 range. So what we're doing is we're building up our cardiovascular system with that low intensity, with some nasal breathing, and then that low cadence, it ends up building our muscular endurance, our ability for our muscles to do a repetitive motion over and over and over and over under a little bit of stress. And then the last hour is where we actually step it up to intervals of over race intensity. That is where things get tough. So whether you're going for 1 hour or 3 hours or 5 hours, the last hour earmark for slightly over race intensity. When you're already tired, very good workout. Does this ride have to be continuous or can you start and stop? Well, follow those guidelines for the distances or the times of this ride. You want to hit those guidelines. The first chunk, that is the low intensity chunk, the majority of the ride, can be start and stop. The last hour, however, make that continuous. That is what we're really trying to get the benefit out of. That higher intensity, continuous ride at the end is where you're gonna build a ton of fitness. So try to make that as continuous as possible. And what about running after the bike? Well, remember that what we're trying to do is make this a race simulation day. So certainly in the last 2 to 3 months before a race, you want to start getting in a fair amount of brick workouts, especially after a long distance bike where you are going to be on tired legs like you are in a race. Now this brick run is not where you are building endurance, so it doesn't have to be long. For a sprint athlete, might only need to be somewhere around 10 minutes. For a half Ironman athlete, maybe somewhere around 20 to 30. For a full Ironman, 30 to 40, that's about it. We just want to see how our legs are going to react off the bike and give it that sensation of turning over the legs after being tired on the bike. This is hard to talk and warm up. And then the last thing, this is the ride where you figure out your triathlon race nutrition. So whatever your nutrition plan is, and if you go to triathlonterran.com/triathlon nutrition guide, you can get calculators, the entire system of how to figure out your race nutrition customized to you. This is the workout that you start figuring out what does and doesn't work for you. So whatever you think you're going to do in a race or you want to start trying, this is the time to work out those kinks. You do not hear something 2 weeks before a race and you're like, ooh, that sounds like it'll work. I'm gonna try that come race day. Absolutely not. You do it in these workouts. This is especially critical if you're following a train low, race high method, where you train on lower carbs and race on higher carbs. You have to have, in that case, 1 workout a week over the final 6 weeks of your prep where you are actually taking in carbohydrates, because if you've trained low for months and months with the majority of your workouts, you have to then give your body the ability to fuel itself off of carbs. So this is the workout that you do it in. Now, you can go back and rewatch some of this, take the notes, or you can go to the links in the description below. We'll put the links to the How to Bike with Cameron Worth early sale for the masterclass, the links for how to get to the heart rate training system, and how to get to the triathlon race nutrition system. Or if you want to be on Team Trainiac, where all of this is laid out for you, every single workout, you can go to triathlonterran.com/team waitlist, and all of this is set up for you every single workout. 5,500 workouts customized to you all year round. It's pretty good. So there you go, Trainiacs. That is your long, key, critical, long endurance bike workout, how to structure it over the last 2 to 3 months before a big race. Now I just have 2 hours and 45 minutes left of this stuff. What's on Netflix these days? What's good on Netflix? Check out the links in the description below. Make sure you're subscribed. Go follow me on Zwift, all that jazz. Later, Trainiacs.
This is the GTN show and welcome. We're back into the swing of things and we've got plenty to bring you.
Yeah, now just because there isn't any racing at the moment, we still have plenty of news, including some that's going to motivate you to train. Caption Comp is back and we have plenty of your photos that we're going to be sharing with you.
And we've got some GTN predictions, but with a difference.
Now, I know we have already covered our race predictions for 2019, but we thought we'd give our GTN predictions a slightly different angle, and we're going to be looking at all things triathlon related, predicting what's going to happen this year, but not purely around race results.
Yes, so our first prediction for 2019 is that Flora Duffy is going to come back with a win. Unfortunately, we didn't see an awful lot of Flora racing in 2018 because she was injured for most of it, and she tried to come back too soon because of her wish to defend the title she'd won in 2017. So now that she's hopefully back to full fitness, we're going to see her focusing completely on Tokyo 2020, and I don't think that means she'll be back until she's absolutely ready to win.
Yeah, and next on our list, a little closer to home, we predict, well, most notably Mark isn't here, then we predict that Mark is going to go out too hard when it comes to competing in the Norseman Triathlon.
And our next prediction is that Laura Philipp will podium at the Ironman World Championships in October. And we're basing this on the fact that when she did her debut Ironman last year in October, she did a pretty quick time.
Yeah, she did. She broke the record, I think. It was like 8:34?
It was, yeah.
8:34. And I mean, anyone competing it kind of for the first time, it can be make or break, as you see, like with the conditions quite extreme. But with such a dominating first performance, we're going to put it out there. We won't know this result until October. We're going to have to wait, but we reckon we'll see Laura Philipp on the podium. Next up, we've got two tech predictions, so delving into the unknown world a little bit here, but we did see a lot of tech inventions and new releases of things last year in 2018, including the Nike Vaporfly 4%. So I reckon Adidas are going to have to come up with something to rival that, so watch this space.
Yeah, and I'm going to opt for the fact that Trek are pretty much the only company now that don't have a disc-ready TT bike on the market, and ironically, they were pretty much the flag bearers as such with TT bikes in 2010 when they launched the Speed concept. It's barely changed since then, so I think we're going to see a new Trek.
And our next prediction, well, more mine and Mark's, and I'm pretty feeling confident on this one. We're not going to have to wait very long for Fraser to big up a Scottish athlete.
And patriotic. Now, our next prediction is that the Ironman bike course record will be broken. It will probably be Camworth.
Okay, well, our next one, which Fraser has said, but I think we're all quite happy to back this one, that Jan Frodeno is going to come back to racing with a bang. He's obviously got a lot of frustration after last season and missing out the World Champs in Kona, and we know that he likes to prove a point, so I think when he does come back, it's going to be similar to Flora. We're going to see him dominating and taking the title, whatever race he chooses as his comeback.
Our next prediction is that Lionel Sanders will choose another radical change of diet or position or something.
Yeah, I mean, we saw quite a lot of changes happen in 2018. Some of them not quite so successful as others. I think one of the most memorable ones was the sudden need to lose weight because he realised that maybe, or he thought that if he was lighter from watching the other athletes, that meant he would race faster. Didn't quite work out for him. So, I mean, we hope that he's learned from those mistakes, but still, let's see, I reckon we'll see some sort of crazy change coming from Lionel. But that leads us on, finally, our final prediction, which is one that we are most certainly hoping is going to come true. It's to reach our 200,000 subscriber marker. We've been incredibly grateful to you guys helping us to the 100,000 marker and beyond. And we launched 18 months ago, and 200,000 is now on the horizon. So we look forward to celebrating that one with you when we get there, hopefully quite soon.
And obviously, because I'm here now, surely that'll happen a lot quicker, right?
Yeah, be no time.
We have talked all about our predictions, so we want to ask you to vote which one you think is most likely. Is Mark going to go out too hard at the Norseman? Am I going to be patriotic and big up another Scottish athlete? Probably. And is Lionel going to come up with a new funny training strategy or diet? And finally, another one that you might have come up with.
Yeah, and if you do click other, then make sure you let us know what your prediction is in the comments section below. And to enter that poll, just click on the link above my head.
So now it's time to rewind to, well, way before Christmas when we asked you, does popularity matter in sport?
Yeah, and the answers were pretty clear-cut, to be honest. 84% of you said yes, it did, and just 16% of you said it didn't. So, yeah, clear-cut. Okay, on to the news. And this first one that's caught our eye is Lionel Sanders. Now, we do keep an eye on what he's up to because there's usually something interesting there. And this was back when he was training in Palm Springs, and he actually ventured outdoors to tackle the king of the mountain, the Tramway, which is a fairly famous climb in Palm Springs in Southern California. It's a almost 5K stretch that averages a 9% gradient, so it's pretty tough. Doesn't have that many turns in it, so maybe it's slightly more aimed at those who cycle indoors quite a lot.
But fast forward just 2 weeks later, the week between Christmas and New Year, and there was a full minute taken off of Lionel's time, and that was done by an ex-pro rider called Phil Guyman. Now, he retired in 2016, but he makes an effort to go around the US and capture KOMs that are held by, in his words, often ex-dopers. He doesn't like that, as a lot of us don't. So he makes an effort to go and grab those KOMs and take them back.
Well, he didn't actually, that sounds like we're alluding to the fact that he thinks Lionel's next doper. He doesn't, and his title for his Strava segment, or his attempt, I think, was something like, no beef with Lionel, just can't let a triathlete have the tramway. So I think a triathlete needs to go back and get the tramway.
Now, in sticking with Strava, and for those of us who use it to upload all of our training, and there are plenty of us, because, well, let's face it, if it isn't on Strava, it doesn't happen, right, Heather?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you might have noticed that they've done a really fun little highlights package of our training for the year.
Yeah, if you log onto your Strava account now, you can find the guest review of 2018 that's personalised to you, and they've made it into a video, a little bit of music, including photos that you've uploaded throughout the year, and they come in at certain stages. It gives you stats of how many hours you've spent, how many metres you've climbed, how much time you spent on your bike, swimming or running. And I must admit that I found it a little bit shocking if you look at those many hours and think, God, how much reading I could have done, or how much educational stuff I could have done with that. But then on the other hand, I also realised I probably should have spent more time on my bike. So it's just quite fun, but it could give you a little bit of a gauge for how last year looked and help you plan your 2019. Well, we have mentioned it before, but the Zwift Triathlon Academy is now open for applications. Last year was its debut season with 4 team members. Well, they've doubled that, looking for 8, and they're hoping to find amateur triathletes that they can help reach their goals at Kona later this year.
Now, at GTN, we followed their debut triathlon team, right from the 4 of them trying to qualify for the World Champs, up to and including their performances at Hawaii. And if you want to see those videos, you can find them in the description below.
Yeah, and they're going to be using the Zwift Triathlon ID platform to try and find these amateur athletes. And they're looking for all ages, all abilities, and a real mix of nationalities. So it really is a global search. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you've already been to Kona and you might be targeting a podium this year, or you've never made it to Kona before. If that does sound too good an opportunity to miss, well, you better get onto Zwift, because you've got to be at a level 12 or above on cycling, level 3 or above on running, and then you can fill in your application.
Now, this is the last bit of Zwift news we promise, and if you are a little bit like us, then you're late to the party because the Tour de Zwift has already begun. The tour is a celebration of all things Zwift and the worlds that are within it. It's 9 stages long, over 5 different courses, and each stage runs for 2 days, and there's a rollout every 2 hours.
Yeah, and it actually started on 3rd and 4th of January with the Jungle Circuit held on the Watopia course, and then the 9th stage will be at the end of the month, 29th, 30th of Jan, with the Park Perimeter course in New York City. Now, there's 3 groups for each of these events, A, B and C. A gives you the longer option, and then C actually is women only. And once you've completed all 9 of these, you get a chance to unlock a special Tour de Zwift jersey, which you can then wear with pride when you do your Zwift training.
And if you are like us and you've not managed to start yet, don't fear, because there are actually some makeup days where you can catch up on February the 2nd and 3rd, so really there's nothing stopping you.
We have previously mentioned the 40 extra shots that Ironman have put up for grabs for athletes to get a slot for Kona 2019. Well, they've just actually selected another 10 for that draw, so if you are one of those lucky 10, you'll now get a chance to accept that entry for 2019.
Yeah, and there are still 20 slots left in the final draw, so as long as you get registered by January the 20th, then you're eligible, so get entered, I'd say.
It's time for the caption competition, and you do actually have to cast your mind back, because it was a show before Christmas when we had this photo from the World Triathlon Series World Championships Relays in Hamburg, and it was a pretty good party going on the podium. We had some great suggestions.
Yeah, and the first one that we're going to talk you through is from Morton, and he said, "Somewhere there is a German crying, such a waste." Yeah, I know what you mean, Morton.
I like that one, but it was a close runner-up here by Fat Bloke on a Bicycle. The entire podium was guilty of drafting.
Which is good, I do like that one, but I have decided to take Sarah Danielson's as the winner, and she said, just another picture-perfect victory ceremony.
I like it. Yeah. Well, Sarah, get in touch and we will send you a GTN swim cap. And for your chance to win a GTN swim cap, the photo this week is from the Ironman 70.3 Indian Wells, and it's Carrie Lester, I presume, walking or flossing her way to the finish line.
She channeling her inner Tim Don from our...
It does look like it. If you haven't seen that, you do need to check out Tim Don doing the floss. And was it the rainbow as well?
It was. It had an extra edition, he told us.
You have to watch the Christmas show to see Tim Don in a reindeer outfit doing the floss. But anyway, we have digressed. More to this photo. If you've got any great caption suggestions, make sure you leave those in the comments section below.
So now we're going to look at some of the pictures and things that you've sent in through our uploader, which we always like to see. Now this story is one that I really quite like actually, because last week in our New Year's show we had a soft ride that was featured, and it was at the Super Frog 70.3 Southern California, and we then got a comment in from Rory Francis saying that his parents have a beam bike, one being a soft ride, another being a zip, and I just said, well, can you send us in a picture? And well, here he is.
Well, Rory actually wrote in and said, I've ridden my dad's soft ride on the Queen K. Unfortunately, the beam joint collapsed 2 days later in the race and he couldn't finish. Oh gosh.
Shame.
I'll send you a picture of my dad's soft ride and my mum's zip beam. Well, here they are, I guess. Mum's 77 this month and still rides her zip.
I think that's pretty impressive if you ask me.
Yeah, that is very impressive stuff. Well, our next photo here looks a little different, and we've got a Watt bike that has been sent in by Alvin from Birmingham in the UK. No wonder he wants to be indoors.
Well, he's actually got a bit of a story here. He says, after being hit by a car, my bike is awaiting repairs, so I've got to spend too many hours on the indoor bike riding this in the gym, but good luck with the rehab and hope it's going okay.
Yeah, and I guess there's like worse gym bikes. If you've got a working Watt bike, I know the gym that I use, the Watt bike is never working, so you're doing well with that one.
Yeah, they're pretty good bits of equipment.
Yeah. We are staying indoors for this next one, and surprisingly at this time of year, comes in from David, and it says TTR Columbus in his garage.
Yeah, and he says, it's a project that I did in my garage while being at home with my 1-year-old son, doing work while he had some time between his naps. So I think you've done quite a good job there. It looks like you've got all the sort of things you might need for indoor training. Yeah,
apparently it hadn't been renovated since the 60s, so it's made a good effort with it. I'm interested by the paperwork that's sort of propped in the treadmill. I'm not sure how much reading you're going to do whilst you're running.
Yeah, it does look quite formal, doesn't it?
For the cycle.
But he's got, I mean, I noticed that he had his race wheel sitting on the front, but he's taken the rear one off, which is good thinking. He's got a nice turbo tyre on there, which is good. Fan, flat screen TV. It looks like there might be some gym equipment tucked in the corner there.
Pretty comprehensive, I would say. Well, our final one this week comes in from Hendrik, and it says Rose Pro SL. He's in Berlin, and doesn't say any more other than my neighbours will hate me. So we can only imagine that he's got very thin floorboards.
Yeah, he's in a flat, or I mean, but it's very neat and tidy.
Or he shouts whilst he's when he's suffering on his Zwift or something like that. Who knows?
We don't know, but nice and compact, neat and tidy setup there. So I quite like that.
Well, I like the effort he's gone to make sure he's got the holding screen of GTN on his laptop. I mean, that wins points.
Well noted.
Yeah, very nice.
Thanks for those pictures. We always like looking at them and seeing what sort of stuff you've got for your indoor setup, so please keep sending them in. So it's a new year and we've got a new gear message for you. Now, if you like the hoodies that Heather and I are wearing, or any of the other things that are in the GTN shop, like the cycling kit or all the casual stuff that's in there, then please do head over there and have a look around and see what you can pick up.
Yeah, and hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hit the thumb up like button if you have. And again, one of your New Year's resolutions I would recommend is subscribing to GTN to make sure you get all of our videos. So just hit the globe for that. And if you are still sort of starting off feeling a little bit sluggish in the new year and you want a little bit of a detox with all things triathlon, we've made a video on that just down here.
And if you'd like to see another video where we did about GT Ask anything about triathlon, then you can find that here.
Hello and welcome back to...
Morning, Trainiacs. After 6-7 long months, the main training tank is open. It is a warmer pool. It's quieter after the renovations. It's a little bit brighter. Like here, normally you can't see me. You can now. Basically all of January here, 2019, I am traveling to produce all of the master classes, leaving on Saturday to go hang out with Lucy Charles and Reese Barkley with how to swim. And then we come back home for 2 days, and then we go to LA and hang out with Cameron Worf, the current 2-time Kona bike course record holder, to produce the How to Bike course. Interesting thing about Cam, he sets those records without a power meter. Hardcore. So he give you the little scoop on Cam's approach to cycling and why he is such a stud rider. We're going to talk about his approach to cycling, which is quite a bit different than you'd expect. He was a high-level rower, and then he is the training partner of Geraint Thomas, current Tour de France champion, Chris Froome, previous Tour de France champion. The man's good. The man's good. Let's talk about that after a swim. As I was thinking, like just this morning, in between the swim and now, about what I was going to talk about, like what makes Cam Worf so good when seemingly he might not be, like on the surface, an amazing cyclist. He's 6 feet tall, 157 pounds, 35 years old, so it's not like he's this real young stud that's coming up out of nowhere with a massive amount of cycling talent. It's not like he's this tiny little guy with huge powerful legs and has a huge strength to weight ratio. And then when you look at his performances back when he was a cyclist, he did 2 Grand Tours, whereas Andrew Talansky did 7 Grand Tours, finishing 10th and 11th in a couple of different years in the Tour de France. And Andrew Talansky is coming into triathlon, and it's not like he is blowing people out of the water in the bike. So why then is it that if he doesn't use a power meter, he's not structurally, like just naturally gifted for this, he's not some young stud full of testosterone, why is he so good? I've come up with 5 reasons that I think Cam is quite good, and I want to dig into these when we do the masterclass. So if you haven't yet, I haven't really talked about this a whole lot, go to triathlonterran.com/early masterclass. And while you're there, there are 50 spots, actually there are 40 spots now left for a half price offer to get in right now on the How to Bike with Cam Worf Masterclass, as well as the Sarah True and Ben True Running Masterclass. And if you're involved in that early sale, you get it for half price, and you can submit your questions to Cam, Sarah, Ben, and take part in putting together the content. Okay, let's get into those 5 things. So number 1, all of this is not to say that he is not a talented athlete and he's just willed himself to become a good cyclist. He knows what he's doing. He was an Australian National Championship rower. He went to the 2014 Olympics in rowing, so he's got an enormous engine and he knows sports really well. Talking to him when we got together with him in Kona, he knows so much about just how to be a good athlete. And one of the things that he does, this is the first thing that I notice, is that he builds an immense amount of power, trains really well, gets himself in good cycling form, but then when it comes to really key races, he starts whittling himself down and dieting down to a really light weight. Now, he doesn't do this all year round. You can look at photos of him over the course of a year and see that he fluctuates a little bit in weight, but when he starts tapering for Kona, because he knows that it's not healthy for any of us or him to focus on dieting year round, he just diets, I would guess, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, loses that last little bit of weight, holds a lot of the power that he's built, and all of a sudden, he has a really good power to weight ratio. Next thing is that he focuses on the aerodynamics of his body. Something that he talked about was that it doesn't matter what bike you're on, 85% of the aerodynamic drag that we have to push through the wind is our body. It's not the bike. So while the bike can be optimized for this and that and perform well in the wind tunnel and all these things and save 2% of your average watts over the previous bike, well, it really doesn't matter if your body isn't optimized for aerodynamics. So this means being comfortable in the aerodynamic position. This means having a tri-suit that is really aerodynamic. This means in Cam's case, having the bike, after he is able to get into that aero position really well, having everything optimized for even more aerodynamics. And this is like, I will link to a video up here that I did about something Cam did that I have implemented on the Ventum right in behind you, that is to angle the aero bars up so that you can be more comfortable and more aerodynamic. So the second thing there is he focuses on aerodynamics. Third thing, and this is fairly wild, he does about 75 to 80% of his training on a road bike, really only riding his tri-bike every 7 to 10 to 14 days, no more than once every week, he says. And he does this because you can put out a ton more power in the road position, but you still want to have your body fairly comfortable in the triathlon position. And if you're not comfortable on your bike, you're not going to want to go out and ride it. And then when it comes right down to it, as Matt Steinmetz said when he did the bike fit with me in Boulder, we're spinning circles. So sure, you can go onto a mountain bike, you can go onto a fat bike, you can go onto a road bike for the vast majority of your training, but make sure that you have one day a week that is a very triathlon simulated kind of day, a very long ride with a brick run after it, simulating what you're going to be going through in a triathlon, so that when you get to that race, your body knows exactly how to do it. You got the muscle memory for it. A fourth thing, and this is where we start getting into some fairly unique things that we have to talk about with Cam in the masterclass, because I'm not entirely sure what he means. Something that he said over and over while we got together with him in Kona was, I'm just gonna work the road. And what he means by that is he wasn't really even going to put a Garmin computer on his bike. He was going to have the power meter on there, and he might have a power meter somewhere stashed around so he could have the power file, but he wasn't going to focus on average power. He was going to, what he called, work the road. I think that what that means is instead of riding for an average power, he was going to ride for speed at a perceived effort. So if he perceived something was about race effort, what he would do is try to build speed where the course allowed it on rollers, and then not blow himself up and not try to lose much speed when the course doesn't allow it, say on gradual false flats, things like that. But this is where the masterclass is going to be good, because what he says is every Tour de France rider knows how to ride for speed and not power, whereas triathletes are just power, 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 power. Meanwhile, he comes in as a cyclist and starts blowing everyone out of the water because he knows how to work the road. And the last thing, this is super cool. He does a ton of rides. And the cool part is that we can see this on Strava. Check this out. Whereas a lot of pros are really secretive about their training, like try to find some training data about Patrick Lange, it doesn't exist. You can see basically every single ride that Cam Wurf does. And what you see is he rides a ton. But he's not just going out there and smashing himself ride upon ride, doing, these are all in kilometers, 126 kilometer, then 72, then 78, then 140, then a 41. He's not just killing it all the time. So let's look at basically 3 weeks out. Like, these are some of the biggest, most critical rides that you would be doing. Long ride on September 23rd, 235 watts, average power, pretty good. Let's look at the other ones. 139 watts the day before, 181 watts the day before that. 221 watts, yeah, okay. 184 watts. I mean, these are numbers that, 164 watts for average power. These are numbers that I would put out on a long ride. So what I want to chat with Cam about is how is it that you can go from putting out this kind of power, average power of 164s and 181s and 235s when you're really killing it for a few hours, but then all of a sudden you go to Kona and you put out this record-setting, course record-breaking ride averaging 296 watts over 4 hours, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds. These are the things that we are going to dig into in the masterclass. So if you are interested in getting in on that, asking Cam some questions, saving yourself 50%, go to triathlonterran.com/early masterclass. Get in on the presale. That's what I got. He's an interesting dude. Funny story about Cam. For the first, I would say, 3 months of knowing about him on Instagram, I thought he was trolling me. I thought he hated me, calling me chubby and stuff like that. No, that's just his sense of humor. And then when I see him in person, he's actually quite a nice individual. Don't tell him I said that. All right, go check it out. Watch this. Chaos. Later, Trainiacs.
Right, when we talk about riding our bikes fast in a triathlon, there is one name that springs to mind. It is Cam Worth. So thanks so much for joining us today, Cam.
Thanks for having me and my bike.
So Cam owns the Ironman World Championship bike course record and has just set the Nice bike course record and is working up to another stellar performance for 2018 World Ironman Championships. So today we're going to be running through some top tips from Cam. Welcome back to another episode of the GCN Tech Clinic, where we help and answer and solve your bike-related problems. So if you've got one, leave it for me down there in the comments section and I'll do my very best to help answer it in a forthcoming episode. As ever though, let's crack on with the first question this week that comes in from David Hall. Now David says, "Hey John, GCN Tech Clinic is always great." Checks in the post, David. Now, David has got a Bianchi Vianerone 7 with a Sora 9-speed group set. However, looking to get some new wheels, and online, most wheels specify 10 or 11 speed. Can he use those wheels with a 9-speed group set? Would love to ask the local bike shop, but he's living in Japan, and he says, "John, you know the language barrier is hard." Yes, I do, after my trip out there to Japan, but I found everyone out there was really, really helpful. But let's solve this problem then. Well, the good news is, that 9-speed cassette will in fact fit on, well, I think all 10 or 11 speed free hubs out there. I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't. What you will need though is most likely a little spacer, quite often, which goes on first onto the free hub before you put the cassette on, and then before you put that lock ring on. They do come in different thicknesses, so pop along to your local bike shop and I'm sure even with the best sign language, you can communicate there and get the right size spacer. Enjoy your new wheels. And the next question this week comes in from Play and Teach. Now, Play and Teach has got themselves some 105 28mm ready brake calipers. However, they've had a couple of scary moments where small stones have got caught in between the calipers and the tyre, and in one case they came to a sudden stop. Do I have any advice, or do I know why this could be? Because they think there should be enough clearance to actually be able to run those tyres. And the tyres were actually Continental GP4000s, and Play and Teach reckons that they are slightly on the larger side. And Play and Teach also wants to know, should they give up on them and try a different 28mm tyre altogether? Now this one is actually really hard to diagnose without actually seeing the bike and making sure that you have fitted all of the components on there correctly. So it's likely to be actually the brake calipers and the brake shoes. But something here certainly worth considering is the brake bridge, for instance. Is it really close to the tyre? So is it on a really close clearance frame? If so, that could well be providing the problem where the actual material of the brake caliper is too close to the tyre. And yeah, if you are getting little stones, they could well rub on there. So I'd have a look really, because not all frames are going to be compatible with 28mm tyres, even if you do get those specific calipers. So just have a look over that. As for ditching the GP4000s and trying something else, you well, I guess you could try, but the 4000s, in my experience, in the 28mm, they do measure pretty true to what they say they are. So first up, I'll just check the actual clearances around your fork crown as well as the brake bridge on the rear triangle. Next up, we've got Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel says, when do you know it's time to add a tooth to the big chainring? Currently using a 52 tooth, but they're thinking they need to go to a 53. Now, Daniel does Ironman triathlons and is in the highest gear possible going down hills and spinning at over 110 RPM. On the flat, generally in the 4th smallest cog on the cassette. Would I need to change the small chainring too? Right then, Daniel, the mere fact you're answering this question, I reckon you're ready for it. Especially, like you say, you're actually spinning out at quite a high cadence on those descents. And by going up to a 53 tooth chainring, it is going to give you just a little bit of a smoother ride, I guess, on those descents. And also on the flat, this means that you could probably be in the 5th sprocket from the end, and therefore probably have a smoother chain line than in the 4th, therefore giving you possibly half a watt or a watt saving, something like that. As for replacing the inner chainring at the same time, I know lots of people out there would recommend it, so quite often on chainrings it will say, certainly on Shimano, 53, 39 on there and things like that, and people will say replace them in pairs because the shifting ramps and pins are designed in such way. However, that's not strictly necessary. I've done it, certainly mixing and matching chainrings. Okay, the shifting performance maybe isn't absolutely the best it could be, but it's still certainly adequate. Plus, you've got to think about how often you actually change chainrings to start with. Okay, next question comes in from Matt Ryan. Now, Matt says that they've picked up a Felt B16 as a stepping stone into triathlon, but the internally routed cables seem to rattle inside of the frame. Any ideas on the best way to fix it? It's a minor annoyance, but I like it when everything is just right. Man after my own heart there, because, well, yeah, I hate it when a bike rattles. And also, I do forgive you for taking part in triathlon. There we are, only joking. But what about that annoying rattle then? Well, first up, find out exactly which tube it's coming in, probably in your top tube or your down tube. Remove likely your bottom bracket, or at least certainly your chain set or your seat post. Isolate that cable, but how are we gonna do that? Get yourself some bubble wrap. Yep, that's right. So it's lightweight, it's not going to trap water, it's not going to hold it or anything like that. And you can wedge it in place. And if you're lucky, you can kind of wedge it so that your cables are away from the actual internal of the frame tubes, therefore preventing that rattle. It's something I've done in the past before on one of my own bikes, and it is a fail-safe solution. Yes. Okay, next up is Arta, and Arta says, hi John, great show, I watch it every week. Again, another check in the post. I have a 2015 Cannondale Super 6 with SRAM red and an 1128 cassette. Planning to buy a new and lighter pair of wheels to use on uphill training and races. I read that the rear derailleur does not work with an 1132 cassette. Is that right? Do you think it could work with an 1130? What should I do? Thanks a lot, cheers from Brazil. Brazil, hey? Always wanted to visit. Right, okay, what about that then? Well, I'm pretty sure that a 32 tooth cassette won't be accommodated unless you're using one of the Y-Fly model rear derailleurs, but again, I'm not exactly 100% sure on that one. So if you do though, you're likely to have to play around with that B-tension screw to actually basically adjust where the upper pulley wheel sits in relation to the cassette sprockets, and you're going to want to actually drop that down a little bit by using that screw. But you would definitely be able to use a 30 tooth cassette on there, because a friend of mine, he's done exactly that, and he used a Shimano cassette, believe it or not, to get the compatibility. But yeah, it's very likely, whatever you do, you are going to need to play around with that B-tension screw, so just be aware of that to get perfect shifting. And good luck. Next up is Casey Rutledge. Now, Casey has got a problem with their bike that the front forks dropouts were painted, and well, the paint has begun to crack and fall off. How do they stop it from progressing up the fork? Right then, Casey, paint problems, never good. Now, I consulted with my colleague Doddy over on GMBM for this, and luckily we agreed. Best thing to do, get yourself some acetone or an alcohol swab, clean up those dropouts and where the paint has been affected really, really well, and then get yourself some clear nail varnish and then simply paint it on there to kind of build a bridge in between the current paint and the stuff that's been missing. Therefore, that should seal it and prevent any paint from flaking further up your forks. Next up is Lau here, who says they really enjoy watching the show. How safe is it to run SRAM ETAP rim brake shifters using a TRP disc brake caliper on a disc frame? Will the cable pull destroy the frame? Right, I've checked this one out. Now TRP actually lists all of their cable operated disc calipers as being compatible with all cable shifters out there, or cable brake levers on the market, so you will be safe with that. As for it destroying your frame with a cable pull, no danger of that, because the inner cable is going to be running through an outer cable. So obviously that outer cable, that stays fixed in place, and it's simply the inner cable which travels through it. Next up, Stephen Moore. Now, Stephen says they've got a pair of CX18 rims on Campag record hubs for a vintage Gazelle build. Keen to see this one. Will the tubulars still be good if re-glued? They look new, with no signs of degrading or perishing. They're 25 years old, but had very little use. Stephen, a fellow vintage tech lover. I like this. And then, well, in fact, Eddie Merckx, he used to have a cellar full of old tubular tyres that he had maturing, but like anything, after a little bit of time, they could well go off in effect. But like you say, the rubber looks good. They look to be new almost, but something to consider here with old tubulars, and this is a problem I've ran into myself, is the base tape pulling away from the actual carcass of the tubular. So a way of discovering if that's going to happen is by mounting those tubulars without any glue on onto a pair of tubular rims and pump them up to their maximum PSI, and then inspect that base tape to make sure it's still fully adhered onto the actual carcass. If it's not, something I've used in the past to actually re-stick it onto the carcass is some latex-based adhesive. It seems to do the trick all right. A lot of people, they recommend using tubular cement, so your tub glue for instance, but I found that gets a little bit too hard, and also it tends to create just a bit of extra bulging really, not giving you the super smooth ride of tubular tyres. So give that one a go and see how you get on. Plus, I'm desperate to see that vintage Gazelle build. Absolutely love them. Right, final question this week comes in from Simon Gard. John, I've got a Vitus Energy crossbike with SRAM 1x. The frame has internal cable routing, but being 1x, I have 2 ports on the bike which are filling up with mud. Contacted Vitus, they don't do blanks. Do you have any ideas or know where I can buy them? Right, Simon, nice little bike you've got there by the sounds of it, and great that you're going out and getting nice and muddy. Right, easiest solution here. Clean up around those areas and simply put some frame protector on there, or insulation tape, gaffer tape, anything like that. All right, it's not going to look the most elegant, but well, it's a cyclocross bike, so it's getting covered in mud anyway. It's going to stop mud getting in there. Something that a friend of mine does, they actually fill those holes with silicone sealant. So the sort of thing which you put around the edge of a bath or shower, something like that. Just be careful though, you don't put too much in there and it goes all down inside the frame. You want to be able to pick it off in the case that you do go back to a 2x setup. Last one, a little bit extreme perhaps, but well, I like to throw them out there. If you've got a friend or know someone who has a 3D printer, maybe, just maybe, they could make you something fancy to go in there. But again, that's going to take quite a bit of planning and really accurate measuring, in fact. So personally, I'll probably just go for that simple, elegant, well, maybe not that elegant, but tape solution. Right, there we are. This week's Tech Clinic done and dusted. But remember, if you've got yourself a technical problem, get involved down there in the comments section. Also, if you've got a solution for one of these problems too, why don't you help them out? A friend in need is a friend indeed. Right, also don't forget to like and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. And now for another great video, how about this week's Monday maintenance? Just down here.
Hello, I'm Bob McEwen. Welcome to the Fifth Estate. It is a tale of almost mythic proportions, of a hero who overcomes unlikely routes and a deadly disease to dominate his sport as no one ever had before. And make no mistake about it, Lance Armstrong had everything: glory and fame and fortune, as well as the critics insisting it was all too good to be true. The Armstrong story is either one of remarkable success or an astounding fall from grace. Or, as you're about to see, both. It was the year 2000 when Lance Armstrong arrived in the ancient city of Girona in Spain. He moved onto this narrow stone street, buying the apartment on the second floor, behind front doors, 20 feet high. The world's top bike racer had come from France, where he was a hero, but where the police and the press were increasingly fixated on the use of drugs in cycling. The Spanish seemed far more relaxed about it all. It's why earlier that same year, Armstrong and his teammates came to a hotel in Spain to have blood drawn from their bodies, to be kept for transfusions when they needed a boost of fresh blood cells at the next Tour de France. Doping, perhaps, but with your own blood, virtually undetectable. For someone who would earn over $20 million a year riding his bike, there were secrets to keep behind the walls of this former medieval palace.
Look at this now. Armstrong is absolutely flying here. He has achieved yet another page in this fairy story that just goes on.
The story of how Lance Armstrong got here, the legend larger than life, and the dizzying descent back to Earth begins not in one of cycling's European hotspots, but in the bike racing backwater of Texas. Young Lance grew up without a father, but with a hard-working mom, a talent for sports, and the mental toughness to succeed at punishing events like the triathlon. Eventually, he would abandon the swimming and running to become U.S. national champion on two wheels. And by the early 90s, barely into his 20s, Armstrong was ready to test himself against the very best at the pinnacle of professional cycling in Europe and in the biggest race of all, the Tour de France.
Armstrong has the advantage here. He's on the right side of these riders.
But even for a highly touted newcomer like Armstrong, the Tour de France would be a struggle. In his first 4 attempts, overall, his best result was 36th place.
He had never really been an overall contender. He had won stages, individual stages, but he just never really had it in the big mountains, in the Alps, in the Pyrenees. He had never had that that ability to climb with the best.
Fellow American Tyler Hamilton came to Europe to win a job in the peloton, the pack of riders who are the supporting cast for stars like Lance Armstrong.
Let's just say I was getting killed, fighting to be, in the middle of the pack, naturally.
It was soon clear to him that many of the European pros had an unnatural advantage.
There wasn't a whole lot of news about doping, but once in a while it would pop up. But yeah, it was in the back of my mind that it was out there. To what degree, I didn't know. I didn't know if it was 5% or 10%, or later I learned it was probably closer to 80%.
Doping, the use and abuse of drugs, has always been integral to the sport of cycling. As far back as the 1920s, 2 French brothers, early Tour de France heroes, died from doping complications, as have dozens of other elite racers in the decades since. According to David Walsh of London's Sunday Times, doping in cycling has evolved from stimulants to substances much more sophisticated.
Drugs like cortisone and I think steroids and testosterone became, drugs that people used a lot. It was definitely cheating, and it was definitely wrong. But I don't believe that it was as corrupt as the EPO doping would be.
EPO is a term you'll hear a lot in our report. It's shorthand for the drug erythropoietin, one function of which is to increase the production of red blood cells, which carry oxygen throughout the body. The more oxygen, the more endurance, which is why EPO is the drug of choice in cycling. When you arrived, was this a decision you thought you would have to make, to dope or not to dope?
The learning curve was very steep. And yeah, the doping part just came naturally. And all of a sudden, the team doctor approached me, and the rest is history.
What he took first was testosterone to speed up his post-race recovery. Then the doctor suggested something else, injections of EPO to increase stamina. Any qualms Hamilton had took a back seat to what the EPO might mean for his career.
When he approached me with the EPO, it was almost like being invited into a fraternity. You know, it was like, I felt like I was on the B team at the start of the year, and it was almost like I was being invited into the A team.
He has been a great one-day rider right from the beginning, but it remains to be seen whether he can do the biggest stage races such as the Tour de France.
Journalist David Walsh says Lance Armstrong would ultimately make his own decision.
I think Lance embraced the challenge of doping and soon turned it into an opportunity. In other words, well, imagine if we could dope more intelligently than everybody else.
You solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
Several years later, in a deposition for a civil lawsuit over bonus money, Armstrong seemed evasive when asked about the drug climate of the 1990s.
Doping in sport has existed since the original Olympic Games, so hypothetically, could you say that? Yeah.
Well, not hypothetically. I appreciate that testimony. I'm talking about now actually during that time period.
Do people test positive sometimes? Yes.
After the break, the making of the myth of Lance Armstrong.
He's a chameleon. He will be whom he wants you to see, what he wants you to feel.
For American cyclist Tyler Hamilton, if you wanted to compete with the best in the world, the ultimatum was simple: use drugs or go home. He says that didn't make it easier.
The whole moral part of it, I just try to push it in the back of my head and not think about it. You know, I'd always go back to everybody else is doing it. It's what I gotta do.
Lance is out of the box.
Reporter David Walsh says by this point, Armstrong's teammates saw indications he was doing it too. The physical transformation from a lithe cyclist to a linebacker on wheels.
His physique changed completely, much stronger. He built himself up, much more muscular, and everybody was astonished. Now, he had started working with Michele Ferrari at that time, so Ferrari basically was starting to create a quite different, athlete.
Armstrong's new Italian physician, Dr. Michele Ferrari, had a reputation in cycling circles. Though he denied giving EPO to his riders, he defended those who did, arguing it was no more dangerous than drinking orange juice. But there were suspicions about his training methods and a nickname, Dr. Evil. Over 10 years, Armstrong would pay Ferrari about $1 million.
Did you believe at that time we started going to see him in the mid-90s that he had what would be considered a bad or unpopular reputation?
Oh, I think in those days anybody who rode fast or performed well had a questionable reputation, which hasn't changed to this day.
Whatever the speculation about Lance Armstrong's reputation, in the fall of 1996, everything would change when he was diagnosed with advanced testicular cancer, which had spread to his chest and brain.
On Wednesday, October 2nd, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer.
Told he might not live, that he might never race again, seemed a reasonable conclusion.
All the reports we were getting at the time was that it was serious. So yeah, I mean, you wondered first, would he be okay, and then you thought, let's hope he can get back and have a career.
Longtime friend and fellow rider Frankie Andreo and his then fiancée Betsy went to the hospital in Indianapolis along with other Armstrong friends and family.
He had a private room and it was very small, so we couldn't fit the 6 of us in that room, so we went to a conference room where he had a scheduled meeting with his doctors.
They offered to leave, but Armstrong insisted they stay. What Betsy Andreo heard next was the first glimpse of his doping program to someone outside the inner circle.
The doctors asked some banal questions, and then it came out, have you ever used any performance-enhancing drugs? And I mean, Lance was holding his IV and then just nonchalantly rattled off EPO, growth hormone, testosterone, cortisone, steroids. My eyes popped out of my head, and Frankie saw I was upset. We excused ourselves from the room immediately, and I turned to Frankie and I said, if you're doing that, I am not marrying you.
Betsy Andreo says she mentally filed away what she had heard at the hospital, for now. According to Frankie, sometime later, Armstrong brought the subject up during a training run.
He kind of asked about how Betsy reacted to what happened in the hospital room.
What did you tell him?
I said she freaked out a little bit, and, you know, we got in a couple arguments, but then kind of went away.
Did he respond or say anything further about it?
No, it was very short.
But almost a decade later, after those accusations were made public, under oath, Lance Armstrong denied any of it ever took place.
How could it have taken place when I've never taken performance-enhancing drugs?
Okay.
How could that have happened?
That was my point. You're not. It's not just simply you don't recall. Just.
How many times do I have to say it?
I'm just trying to make sure your testimony is clear.
Well, if it can't be any clearer than I've never taken drugs, then incidents like that could never have happened.
Okay.
How clear is that?
He's a chameleon. He will be whom he wants you to see, what he wants you to feel. If he wants to use you, if he needs something from you, he will be charming. He will charm the heck out of you. If he wants you to shut up, if he wants to send a message, he will be threatening and intimidating. And we've seen both ends.
Before I was diagnosed, I was competing as a professional cyclist.
Whatever happened in that hospital room, what would happen next is one of the great tales of the strength of the human spirit. Incredibly, within a year, Lance Armstrong would recover from surgery, defeat his cancer, and establish his own charity to help others fight the disease as well. What's more, miraculously it seemed, he was riding again.
Nobody knew if he'd come back, and then I think it was late in the year in 1997, you know, I learned that Lance Armstrong was going to be my teammate, and that was really exciting.
On the front now, Tyler Hamilton with his jersey ripped open because it is very hot today in the Pyrenees. And
he was a hero to me. And all of a sudden, yeah, we're teammates and sometimes even roommates.
And Tyler Hamilton was also about to be a witness to one of the darkest moments in cycling history.
Et je remercie le public qui a été qui nous a énormément.
It was the eve of the 1998 Tour de France, which Lance Armstrong would not ride.
Et je donne rendez-vous à l'année prochaine.
Police pulled over a car belonging to the top-ranked French cycling team Festina. Inside